two or three who don't know me, I'm Ashley Hutchinson. I run A&S Business Consultants. I've done so since 2012. I'm part of the Associate Director team at Inspire, and I feel like the last 3 weeks of my life I've been working with clients of different sizes and shapes, trying to help them through various questions relating to coronavirus. I'm quite looking forward to being over.
Yeah. I think we can all second that one.
We'll go round, but I'm going to lead a brief presentation I put together, which is a document you'll all receive afterwards once I've made some changes subject to your feedback. And then Rob, I presume, will come back to me once everyone's had a second or two. That's me done from an intro perspective, Rob. Okay, all right. Let's just run along then. I'll just go on the top of my screen. So Nigel, I know you just switched your mic off, I think, but are you all right just to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. That was actually John just calling, but anyway, yeah, sure. So I'm Nigel. I'm the founder and CEO of a branded food business called Truffle Hunter. We're in our 10th year of trading. We buy and sell fresh truffles, and we manufacture a range of branded truffle products which we sell all around the world, really. With probably 65% of our business is export. Obviously we're selling to all the sales channels. So we're selling to the restaurant channels, specialty retail, we sell online, we sell to food manufacturers, and we've been hit pretty hard. We've been hit pretty hard in as much as all of our food service customers are basically closed, losing us probably somewhere between 30–35% of our sales. But unexpectedly, our online business is performing really, really strongly. So it is making up for quite a lot of that shortfall. So sales-wise, we're not in too bad a position. The biggest issue we've got is credit crunch. So basically, our wholesale customers just not paying us at all. So we're not in a terrible situation, but it's obviously quite difficult.
Thanks, Nigel. Sarah?
Hi there, I'm Sarah. I'm CEO of a social enterprise based in Dorset called the Arts Development Company. We're a sector support organisation for arts and culture. We've got a mixed income base, so we haven't been hit probably as hard as possibly some of you guys. In terms of our traded income, is probably only 25% of our income base, and we're lucky to have reserves, but we just have no future work at the moment at all. So everything's postponed. Obviously, all the theatres are shut. Arts and culture is just simply not happening. And also, we manage a creative hub in Dorset, a building. So I'm really expecting my tenants to ask for rent relief and rental holidays, which obviously is going to affect our traded income as well. So yeah, that's us.
Thanks, Sarah. Steve?
Yes, so I'm late. I can only blame IT. Yeah, we're slowly getting used to this. I run Aqualite Detection. We turn over about £1.4 million a year. We've got eight direct people and a couple of contractors. We make devices that monitor water, basically, water sensors, and also the flow of water, looking for leaks. We're essentially in the construction industry. It's just gone through a number of convulsions in the last few weeks. I've got 4 people on furlough, including someone who left after February the 28th, but before all the restrictions really became live. So we've done the decent thing and put him on furlough as well. I've got one person who has an offer, was supposed to be joining on Monday, but we've had to put that back a month. His previous employer, who made him redundant on April the 5th, has refused basically to put him on furlough. So I'm really racking my brains as to what we can do to help him. But I think ultimately he will join, but I don't think next week is the time. The sites all closed down. Scotland closed everything. In England, it was a bit more messy. It was more, they closed because no one would go there. They've now got some operating procedures. Version 3 is due out today, and we'll deal with what happens when you have to be in close proximity. For example, in a cage lift or something like that. I mean, a lot of these things have only got capacity for 2 or 3 people, and they have an operator standing in them anyway. So it's they're not 6 foot wide. So there's going to have to be something done about that. And they've also got problems with waste disposal. Doesn't really affect us, but it just shows the thoroughness they're having to go to. But there are indications from the government that they want to get all the sites open. I can see that because it's the what can I say? It's the biggest industry they're likely to get open, and the motor manufacturers aren't going to go anywhere soon, and all the rest is leisure and pubs and clubs and restaurants and shops and all that kind of thing, which can take a lot longer. So the government clearly wants it all going, and I think that will happen. We've got 2 sites we've been demanded to attend at, well, not quite a moment's notice, but at less than a day's notice. And we're having to try and deal with that while people are on furlough, etc., etc. So it's all gone raving mad, really, at the moment. We've had the sort of very swift reduction and an equally steep upclimb, and I'd rather deal with the upturn, to be honest with you. But there is quite a lot going on. What's going to happen with the rest? What's going to happen with the rest of it all? I don't know. And we will have problem. We're a manufacturer as well. We do subcontract it, but they're still working. Whether we can get all the parts we need, we'll wait and see.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, supply chain is certainly one of the things that's starting to become an issue, I think, for a lot of people.
Well, it will be, because everything comes from abroad, and in the end, we don't mind anything much here. It all comes from abroad in the end. Yeah,
sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Over to Nikki, if you can.
Some scrap keeps trying to call me. Nikki Cooper. I'm MD of the Sound Marketing Group. We have 3 businesses, an embroidered workwear business, which is very quiet, but we are accepting orders. But the difficulty there is that we can't get the garments in from the suppliers very easily, although there are some still supplying. So most of the staff are furloughed there. Our biggest business is an audio business, which we supply telephone audio prompts for all shapes and sizes of business, from big motor dealers through Grafton Merchanting, Bill Base, High Base, big outfits down to hotels and everybody. A lot of those businesses are closed, obviously, the hotels, motor dealers. So whilst we're fortunate in that our business model is monthly rental and a lot of people pay us by direct debit, in other regards, we don't know in terms of back payments how many people are going to be around in order to pay us. So it's the, like everybody, we're not exactly sure how much money is going to be coming in this month. Our other business is an IT support business, which, as you can imagine, is fine because everybody doesn't want to get rid of their IT support at the moment. So they were pretty busy getting all their clients set up remotely, as well as everybody here. But all their bigger projects have been put on hold. So our main challenge is, I think when we're allowed to reopen, I think in terms of IT and audio, things should be okay. It's not a manufacturing process or anything like that. We manage everything ourselves. It's mainly about staff. The staff are our main resource. Embroidery is a different story. We're not really sure how quickly that will, start to, the business will come in really. So our biggest challenge, is cash flow at the minute, and making sure there's enough coming in order to pay everything really.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, thank you everyone. Just before I hand over to Ashley, the purpose of this really was many of us now have got staff working remotely, majority probably, and there is a whole world of managing people remotely under normal circumstances, which is quite different, of course, from managing people in a office environment or factory or whatever. So it's an issue on its own, but you add to it some of the pressures that are on people currently and some of the restrictions and so on, and it is a little bit of a nightmare. And I think it's a little bit of a ticking time bomb. I think it started off fine. Everybody said, okay, we'll work from home. But I think that pressures and issues will be building up over time. And we asked Ashley to run this just as someone who's had experience of doing that under normal circumstances anyway. And then maybe a bit of a discussion as well, I expect, Ashley, in terms of questions and thoughts and exchange of ideas and so on, because it looks like we'll be doing this for a few more weeks yet, at least.
It does, doesn't it? It does.
Yeah. You know, it sounds like, you know, they're thinking about in 3 weeks, a few of the things might be lifted, but I think for a lot of people will still be home working. So it could go on for a good 3 months, I think. But, you know, watching it week by week, of course. So Ashley, over to you, really.
I've recently called the Downing Street briefing akin to Love Island. Your guilty pleasure you actually enjoy, almost look forward to each day.
But I do try to watch that and not too much else, because it's
absolutely.
So I've put together a brief sort of presentation which I'll talk you through, and I'll share my screen so you can see it. The document I'm going to walk through will be sent to each of you afterwards. So when I skim through a slide, I'm not going to talk about what's on there because it's just readable rather than interesting content. This is designed as a bit of a two-way workshop. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send you guys a quick message in the chat forum, which should have come up on the right-hand side of the screens now, just because it's a video meeting rather than a face-to-face. If you've got a particular question, all I'd ask is just flag in there you've got a question rather than jumping in, and then I'll come to you as soon as possible afterwards. I wasn't sure on the background of the people actually going to be involved in the meeting, so I had to make some decisions and some assumptions before putting this together. So I've decided to sort of focus on 3 key areas. The key task is managing people remotely. So the three threads I'm focusing on are communication, key, obviously, planning, and there's some elements of technology in there as well. So some of the hints and tips as to how you can use technology to try to do that. Obviously, we're all on Zoom today, so that's going to be the focus of the technology side of the document and the conversation. But I can talk a little about MS Teams, and even if I go back 10 years or so, I was managing conference calls on WebEx as well. So we can touch on other areas. The other thing I would ask is perhaps mute yourself if you're not talking, just so that your screen doesn't become big for everybody else while I'm trying to share the document, and then we'll see how we go. Is that okay with everyone?
Yep, good.
Can I just ask, just one at a time in 10 seconds or less, what's your experience with video conferencing and managing staff remotely? I'll start with you, Nigel.
Yeah, I'm certainly not an expert at IT, but I've managed to work remotely for quite a while, on and off. So at least I know how to use Zoom, the basics. Although having said that, trying to share my screen suddenly stopped working. So, you know, annoying things like that.
We'll come back to that at the end because I've had a similar challenge. And Sarah, same question. Just I'm trying to get some context. I don't want to go over stuff everybody already knows and is dealing with.
Yeah, we all work from an office, so it's I think most staff probably have 1 day or half a day remote working or working from home as a sort of flexible working policy, but basically zero experience. We're very used to being in a shared open office actually, so the sort of remoteness of it I think is affecting my team quite a lot actually.
Okay, good one, thank you. Nikki?
Well, personally, I work from home 1 day a week, so I'm kind of used to logging in and doing things remotely. So I was able, when staff were about to go of working remotely. So look, remember, there might be some bits of paper you need to take, although you can log onto your computer. There might be things that you refer to, which, you know, you're not going to have. And luckily we've got our own IT business, so they've been fantastic in making sure that the technology worked properly before, and people knew how to use it before they went home. But generally, apart from myself and probably a couple of the other directors, most people are used to working in the office environment. So it's been new for most of them, really.
Good, thank you. And you, Steve? Steve?
There we are. There we are.
There we go.
Right. As you can
I think that's answered some of my questions, Steve.
Yeah. I've had more virtual parties on Zoom than I have business meetings so far. I think the ratio is about 2 to 1. So we're learning Zoom. We did buy it about a year ago, actually, but we've hardly used it. But obviously it's come into its own now. Just shows you how far thinking we are. We're all working from home. I'm in the office at the moment. I come in, well, I think 4 days last week, probably 2 or 3 days this week. The post still comes here. The printer is here. We've got an issue of collecting cash, obviously, like everybody has. So we're trying to send out reminders and statements, all that kind of stuff. I've always let people work at home for things like we're in the far side of Chippenham from Bath, so we've got people that live in Bath. If they've got a dentist appointment at 11:30 for some reason, then it makes little sense for them to drive here and drive back and then drive back here again.
So you do already do it a little, but in an ad hoc.
We have done on an ad hoc basis and infrequently. So what we've gone to is obviously a full on thing. We've got people with obviously childcare and so on. My general manager works from 5 o'clock in the morning to about 8:30, and she'll do 1 o'clock onwards this afternoon, just to try and manage the kids, because her husband has a job as well. Yes. And is working from home also. So, we've got
that is a factor, family, and I will touch on that as we go through this. But
so I'm happy to go with that. We're quite happy with I have spoken to her this morning while she was giving the kids their breakfast. There's the normal noises off and what have you, and to be honest with you, you just get used to all that sort of stuff, and I think that the world is becoming acceptable because we know people have got no choice.
Thank you, Steve. So
productivity, I was just should have closed. The productivity, I think, is down anyway. Working from home is not as effective as being together in the office. I'll just close on that.
No, that's a very good point. So actually, I think although I hadn't planned to say this to start with, I think there are sort of two key areas I hope this will give you some takeaways from. The first is the physical process of man management, and communicating and continuing to communicate with the staff remotely. And the second is hopefully encouraging the best productivity you can hope to get from a remote team. And I don't say that with a negative slant, because from 2004, 2005 onwards, I was managing a remote sales team and a remote technical support and training team for the better part of 7 years. So I do believe it can be productive and it can be effective, but there are definitely hints and tricks as to how to do that, especially when it's almost forced upon you as opposed to being part of normal practice. So I'm about to hit share. So I'm hoping on all of your screens, you should see the start of the first slide of a PowerPoint presentation. Can you all nod if it's there? Yep, Ace, okay. So topic obviously is managing remote teams. So just this is what we're going to go through. All I would say is just remember, if you have got any questions, either send me a little message or wave your hands ludicrously in front of the screen like this if you've muted yourself. So this is the document that's going to be sent to you, but it is a two-way session. So any questions, any queries, anything you fundamentally disagree with, anything you'd like to add, please drop it in and I'll add it to the document before I email it out to you. So with that in mind, can we just start with you all putting your email address into that chat? so it appears with me. It appears with me at this end. If you can. And then I'll know who to send it to afterwards. So I'll give you a minute or two to do that. Lovely, got yours, Nikki, thank you. Steve's, Nigel's, fantastic. So it looks like everyone's confident using chats, that's always a good start. And Sarah's, lovely, okay. So I'm going to skim through the first couple of slides because it's just a bit of background information. And then, so the first thing we're going to talk about is just what effectively has changed. This is obviously fluid, terminology will change, but I think one of the first things that we've lost has been what I call sort of business resource. So the fact you're not in the office, you haven't got, I think Nikki mentioned this, you haven't got access to the filing, the paperwork, the analog world that sits around your typical desk, the resources to have an informal chat to the person you sat opposite that you're working with. That, to a certain extent, has disappeared. Face-to-face relationships have obviously changed dramatically. No one's walking in your office, so you can't walk up to someone's desk. And the ability to actually watch them leave your desk and get on with the task you've just set them, all of those sort of psychological underpinnings, which we're all used to at a subconscious level, has gone. I call this the ad hoc need. It's the, I've just remembered I need something done. I've got to get someone to do it. And I can see them sat outside my office or on the other side of the room. It's also just how some of us work. We don't necessarily plan very well. We're not used to it. So that has changed dramatically. And the control and the motivation. Psychologically, there's a great deal of difference between managing a person in front of you and managing a person remotely, in terms of what are they actually doing as I'm thinking about it. Are they on it? I can apply a carrot or I can apply a stick at 5 seconds notice by giving someone a ring or calling them into the office or walking by their desk or talking to them at the kettle. Motivation by sheer presence is a term I've used, and obviously that's dramatically changed as well. I'll sort of title this page a challenge and an opportunity. I'll come back to that. I'll come back to that in a bit, because I don't actually believe that all of this is lost in managing a remote team, and hopefully that message will come across. So first thing is just, before we get underway, it's just a chance to reflect on what's happened recently. And I don't just mean the furloughing and the remote location now of staff, but the reasons why it's happened in terms of coronavirus, the health risks and implications to people's families. Some of the emotion I've seen around businesses and organisations over the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've not seen in 8 years. In fact, I've not seen in my working life. And it will impact different people in different ways. I've seen senior managers having conversations saying they just can't work. They've got cabin fever because they've been self-isolating often for 2 or 3 weeks before most of us were closed down. So just a period of reflection. And the other point I want to make at this early stage is that I believe there will be some opportunities to make some efficiency improvements because of this. It's just a case, I think, in each business of realising what they are, identifying them, and seeing what you can implement into normal working life after COVID has disappeared out of our lives. And a very quick word for duty of care. All of the changes, all of the concerns floating around, it's very much worth one of your early points of contact after your staff have left the office, asking how they are, how are they coping psychologically, them, their loved ones, their families. I know someone who's been hospitalised, and I've got someone that works for me in a different avenue who lost their father as a result of this. So actually a personal query as to how people have been affected and their impact on their lives is a really good place to start. Whether you consider it duty of care or just personal queries, obviously up to you. I haven't had any questions yet, so I shall push on. So the first step in the process of managing remotely, I'm calling it a communication chain. First step in the process, as I've mentioned, is a duty of care. are your team okay? How are their loved ones? What's their state of mind? Many people have now been working from home for 3 weeks, and it will impact different people in different ways. So it's well worth bearing that in mind. What resources do they need? Have they got everything they need? One or two of you mentioned an IT. I think it was you, Nick. You mentioned you've got an IT team internally, which is fantastic. But not everybody has. If you're going to manage people remotely, the way that we're going to talk about this morning, there will be some resources need. And so just taking some time and some care into planning that, making sure they've got it. That's a key phase. And deciding as a business what technology, what platform you're going to use, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But effectively setting everybody up, establishing the technology, and giving them the means to communicate, whether it's a laptop, whether it's a smartphone, an iPad, a tablet, whatever it might well be. This is a key phase. Getting this right will save a great deal of time and effort further down the road. And then we'll move into what I'm sort of calling test, a meeting plan, and etiquette. Quite important, this. So I wanted, one of the ideas I think works incredibly well is publishing a communication plan. So I've put together a brief example. Yours doesn't have to look anything like this. But from what we're trying to do here is build confidence in a remote working team. We're trying to make them feel like they're still being managed and they've still got regular communication, either with you or with their line manager or with their team. And we're trying to keep them productive. An important part of that is building a routine. And another important part of that is them feeling like they're still being managed. A good way to achieve that is to publish a communication plan. So I'll just touch on a couple of things here. So I've built a communication plan across 5 days. This is completely simulated. It hasn't come from any particular business, but it shows, for example, on Monday, there are 4 specific business calls. Notice in the top right-hand corner, business call is coded blue. So in your business, for example, Nigel, where you've got a production team and planning to run on production, you've got a production planning meeting at 9, followed by a business catch-up at 10:30. Some general team calls might take place at 12, a sales call at 3. Completely simulated, but everyone gets a feeling that on Monday, they're going to be in a call at certain times. The marketing team have got a call every Tuesday at 3. The sales team have got a call every Thursday at 9 a.m. Each of these calls might be the whole business, but you're building a routine, you're building communication, and you're helping people have confidence and feel like they're still being managed. I think a really important part of this process is not making people feel too pressured. So for example, I've got in here a red button. I'll come back to that in a minute. And that's an opportunity to perhaps exercise as a business, to have a social chat at 4:30 on a Tuesday, to have 30 minutes over a cup of coffee or a cup of tea on a Wednesday morning, to have a book or a Netflix business club on a Thursday afternoon, and perhaps an informal chat on a 4:30 on a Friday. What's anyone got planned for the weekend? Have you read anything, seen anything that was interesting? So a plan of sorts, published every week, fluid. So you might change it, but everyone knows there's a management process and a communication process in place. Note at the top of here, if you're using a company Zoom account, stick the details on here so that everybody gets a reminder of the link and the password to your account on the plan. So they've only got to go to one place. And I've touched a little bit on sort of outline meeting etiquette, coded blue or coded red. So in the blue, try to keep it business, be suitably dressed. Don't turn up in, for example, shorts and a string vest, if that's your normal dress code around the house. And try to keep intrusions from pets and family minimal. That's possible sometimes, it isn't at other times, but it's setting an expectation from your colleagues that this is business time. And a social call, completely different. This is a little bit more of a relaxation time. Some of the most successful remote management strategies I've seen get this right. So it's not obligatory. Turn up to 1, 2, 3 a week, depending on how you put on. Dress code is as relaxed as you like. Family and pets and children are encouraged. A glass of wine or a beer is also welcome during these sessions, although maybe not if you're doing a company exercise. That might not be the best idea. But make sure your team know that you're not expecting them to be sat in a shirt and trousers in front of the computer in complete isolation for 8 or 9 hours a day, because A, that's not realistic, and B, it's not necessarily motivating them very well. I've seen lots of ideas for social interaction, and I think it's really important. An online game of pool, for example. Something else I've seen work really well in this area is actually delegating the management of this. So, each week someone else is running a book club, or someone else is running a Netflix club. Someone leads the coffee meeting, gets everyone together. Don't necessarily try and do all of this yourself. Have somebody else running them on a week-by-week basis. So it's not felt controlled by the management. It's generally an opportunity to relax and chill out a little bit. I'll be sending this to you. I think I saw one of you taking a photo or a screenshot. So you'll get this, and if you want this as a presentation or a file you can adjust, just drop me an email and I'll do that. But hopefully that's useful. Some etiquette, some hints and tips. You'll have seen me use some of these already this morning. There is obviously a difference between a video conference and a face-to-face meeting. Communication two-way. If 5 people talk at once in a room, it's relatively easy and it sort of filters away. If 5 people talk at once in a video conference, it just doesn't work. So the idea, for example, of muting someone when they're not talking keeps out background noise. It puts a psychological barrier in the way of them talking. They've actually got to unmute themselves. As you can see circled here on the right, if you've got a question to ask them to just say, come to me in here when you get a minute. That gives the presenter or the chair of the meeting a chance to pause at the right time. Other tips, if you are producing this sort of plan, where you've got a specific time, or you've emailed someone and say, we'll have a chat at 11, get to the meeting 5 minutes early. Gives you a chance to overcome IT glitches. It means an 11 o'clock meeting can start at 11. Each of you are very busy in your working lives. That goes without saying. It may well be you've got 2 back-to-back calls, and losing 10 or 15 minutes at the start of one has a knock-on effect to a second. So encourage early arrival. As I say, asking questions using the chat, or just flagging, can I say something or add something to that, is a useful means. I'm just referring to that now, see if there's anything just come in. Right. Some other hints and tips. Within that chat group, there is the ability to private message. So I would outline quite early on whether you want your team doing that or not. It might be quite constructive. I don't agree with what she's saying at the moment. What do you think before I say anything? Or I thought we were doing this. That's a simple option here on the screen, is by moving the drop-down menu from everyone to a name of the attendee in the meeting, you can private message. Just be aware of that it's a nice function to have. You may or you may not want your team to use it. Okay, I'll pause there. I've got a question from Steve. So if you can unmute yourself, Steve.
There we go. See, I'm learning. Isn't that impossible to enforce in any way? I mean, if someone's private messaging someone else, you won't know anyway. So, I mean, I think I don't see what you can do to change that.
I wouldn't say it's an enforcement issue. You would encourage them to use it or not, or you might not mention it and just it's going on behind the scenes.
I think it will anyway. If people want it to happen, they'll use it.
I suppose the reason I'm flagging it is so that you know that it's there.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. The other point I'm saying is, just encourage a bit of time to get the camera and the microphone set up properly. As you can see from this simulated conference call I was having earlier, that isn't a video conference. It's not face to face. I know that's an extreme example, but I'll come back to some others in a moment or two. So continuing on, muting yourself when you're not speaking. yeah, as well as a psychological barrier, with Zoom, and I'll come to how you avoid this in a minute or two, with Zoom, the person making noise is usually the largest image on people's screens in front of them. So if you mute yourself, you prevent yourself jumping in front of somebody else. If someone walks in the room, says something, asks you if you want a tea or a coffee, it's not heard by everybody. You can, if you choose to, use this drop-down menu that you can see here, top right-hand side of the image, to pin that person onto your screen, which just stops that from happening. You can actually mute people as well if you're the host. Recording meetings, as you saw earlier, this can only be done by the host. It's a very good idea if not everybody can attend, or if you've got staff that are furloughed and you're not communicating with them, you're not asking them to come to the meetings, but you want to keep them abreast of what's going on in the business. You can record the meeting and send it to them and offer them the opportunity to provide feedback or ask questions. It's a good, this is not, obviously not a usual conversation, but communicating with furloughed staff, keeping them in touch with what's going on in your business, I think is a good idea. You are certainly allowed to communicate with them, and sort of not leaving them out in the cold, not part of the business at all, I think keeps them engaged and will give them a bit of a head start perhaps when they come back, rather than 3 or 6 weeks totally disengaged. Final part on hints and tips and a bit of meeting etiquette. Zoom's capable of holding very large conference calls. So this is a call from last week with about 20 odd business owners in it. Just some arrows floating around this screen. You can, if you look top left and second one down on the right hand side, if you want to have a bit of fun, you can change the background on Zoom. You can put yourself in space or in a fighter cockpit, as these two did. In this layout here, I've selected this as my choice of screen display. So rather than the speaker going large, this is Julian here Jason here is the speaker. It's highlighted yellow, but it means that I can see everybody in the group and focus on each of them individually. Psychologically, being able to see someone's face is important. You can tell whether they're engaged, or as you can tell with 2 or 3 of these, not necessarily. As I've called them, there's one dropping off. There's actually more than one dropping off, but at least I can see everybody equally, and I can make that judgment call. Are they paying attention? Am I engaging? Last thing is just setup. You can see from these 3 I've circled, they're backlit. I'm not a photographer, but I do know as a general rule, having a light source behind you when you're looking into a camera, particularly if you're trying to lead the meeting, is not great. It will make your face less visible to your team, and perhaps lead to a bit less engagement from them as well. Is that useful so far? Good. Okay. So let's come back to phase 2. So sort of phase 2, I've touched on this already. Establishing a routine and establishing confidence. I think it was Steve earlier mentioned productivity drop-off. I can quite believe there's a productivity drop-off from people working in the office full-time suddenly to going from home. It's a completely different environment for them. Oh, hello, Sarah. You've now got to change your background. Ace. Getting them into a routine and giving them confidence that you are there, you are communicating, you're on top of tasks, you're on top of what they're doing, and giving them the opportunity to engage with you and the broader business is a key part in getting that productivity back and maximising it as best you can. I'll come in a minute to actually physically man management, but that's a key part in that process. Company meetings or group-wide meetings, very important. If people's confidence are low at the moment, what's going on with the business? Am I going to have a job in a few weeks? If all of those questions are in the back of their mind, their productivity is not necessarily going to be fantastic. So giving them that confidence and keeping them up to date with what's going on, and doing that, if you can, on a company-wide or at least a team-wide basis is a good idea, and doing it regularly. So in my weekly schedule, I have a quick business update at least once a week. Chat outside of group meetings. So don't disengage entirely from the one-to-one comms. It's really important, particularly if someone is struggling, you're not getting what you want from them, pick the phone up. You don't necessarily have to use Zoom or Skype or FaceTime for every conversation. If you've got concerns or you think they have, continue with one-to-one conversations you would have done in the past. And by all means, pick the phone up to people on a regular basis. And as I mentioned earlier, introduce some element of fun. This is where this sort of thing works really well, is don't make it all about work. I'll just come back a minute. If someone gets this, okay, that's quite busy. If someone gets this at the start of the week and the first thing they do is put their head in their hands and say, why the bloody hell have I got 5 meetings? I don't need this. You've probably not quite got the balance right. You want them to be engaged. You want them to be looking forward to communication, and you want to introduce a social element to this. I'll come back to reviewing sort of from a cultural and individual needs point of view in a moment or two. So stage 3, continue and adapt. Once you build a routine, continue it. That doesn't mean don't change it, but keep a routine, keep people's confidence, keep communication up. One-to-one chats are great for progressing individual tasks that you know only 1 or 2 people are working on at the moment. If you've got doubts about an individual's performance, doubts about their productivity, the hours they're putting in, talk to them. Keep the fun up. Change it. So it might be a Netflix club one week, a book club the next week, a social drink the week after. Change the person that is controlling that as well. So if you're doing something social, or if you're running a quiz, for example, ask someone else to host it once a week. Keeps people involved and engaged and proactively working towards it. And build the trust. One of the greatest issues I find with managers that are moving from an office-based management process to a remote, or when I first learned about this back in the early 200s, it was called a nomadic management, when you were managing a bunch of nomads, people not working in the office. Psychologically, it's a challenge to actually trust people that you can't see 8 hours a day. So you need to try and build that. But things must still happen. So if you have got doubts, act on them. If you are concerned about individuals' performances, don't let it go for 3, 6, 9 weeks, because then it can't be in front of you for that period of time. Continue to manage them on a one-to-one basis as you would do normally. Okay, so just final step in this process is continue to review what you're doing. If you don't feel it's working, talk to 1 or 2 people and check. If you don't feel like 3 meetings a week is enough, you want 4 or 5, think about that, change it. If 4 or 5 is too many, you want 2 or 3. If people don't subscribe to Netflix, so half your team's excluded from a Netflix club, change to a book. And the final point, as I sort of said earlier, is take lessons from this. Usually salaries or staff costs and building costs are 2 of the largest costs in a business. If you've got the opportunity to improve the efficiency of either of those 2 costs in your bottom line, this is a great chance to actually see that, realise it, and see if you can implement a different form of management that would make those savings. That's just starting to wrap up. I've got a question to come to from Rob, which I'll come to in a minute or 2 regarding furloughing. Just some salient points. In many cases, this is just as new to your staff as it is to you, and it's forced on them the same way as it's forced on you. I've met a lot of people that don't enjoy working from home and prefer to be in the office, and I've met a lot of managers that prefer their staff to be in the office and don't want them at home. So it does affect everybody in different ways. Technology. This is probably a good chance to touch on Rob's question about furloughing. Technology, some are stronger at technology than others. In order for your members of your team to actually be productive in your business and do what you need them to do, they need to be competent and able to work the technology your business uses. If they can't, and it's just impossible to communicate with them at home, that in itself may be a justification for you considering furloughing that individual. Acknowledge some roles can't function at home. So production operative, for example, you know, it just can't work from home. I'm sure, yeah, that's a fairly obvious statement. I've put importantly differentiate between group events like a weekly company call and a business update and one-to-ones. I've touched on that once or twice already. Often you'll achieve much more with an individual from a one-to-one, particularly if they're struggling or you've got something specific you need them to carry out. So don't put all of your comms into a group, you know, into group meetings. Encourage fun, big motivator. I've mentioned that once or twice. Point 6 is quite important. I've come across this 2 or 3 times recently. Tell your staff it is okay to not be in front of a computer from 8:30 until 5 at night. That's not the best way to get people productive working from home. Looking at a screen for 8 hours a day, it doesn't work, particularly if people aren't used to it. It's okay to make a tea or coffee. It's okay to take half an hour at lunchtime. It's okay to go for a walk. What you don't want is people not answering the phone to you between 1 and 2 because they're afraid they're out walking and the communication drops off. Encourage them to do that sort of thing. Keep reviewing. Keep looking at your communication processes. Keep looking at the technology. Keep looking at how you're talking to people. If it's not working, don't be afraid to change it. And don't be afraid to ask for help, whether that's IT, HR, whether it's accountancy. If you're outside of your comfort zone, find someone that can support you. Finally, I've put two links in the document. If you'd like to, perhaps a good time to unmute yourselves. I've put 2 links in the document here. The first is to Zoom's website, and the second is to Teams. I've used both to communicate with my clients, and my personal preference is Zoom. But Teams offers a great deal more in terms of ongoing communication, both written and video, and file sharing, and it also connects as part of Office 365. So that might be more applicable and more suitable to you and your business. Rob, your question with regard to furloughing staff, I'll probably bounce that one back to you, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, this came up yesterday in one of the other sessions. Just the piece about obviously furlough staff are not at work. So I think the 2 bits were how to include them in some of the pieces that you've been talking about, Ashley. The the more social aspects, so they feel still part of the team and not completely cut off. And secondly, we had some discussion yesterday about with the guys that were on that about what's appropriate to ask furlough staff to do, even though they're on furlough. So can they do any work at all while they're on furlough? And 1 or 2 people were finding it challenging because some people were willing to engage a bit, and others just thought they're on holiday. So it just might be worth covering that bit because it's sort of relevant to this as well, because you're trying to manage your furloughed staff as well as your others, because you're looking to keep those guys included and feeling part of the team, so that when they do come back off furlough, hopefully, they slide back into the business reasonably easily, rather than feeling like they've been backpacking around the world for 6 months and haven't got a clue what's going on. So
I think the key to communicating with furlough staff is you're not asking them or binding them to a specific time, a specific function, and making them a productive part of your business. I would actively encourage communicating with them from a mental well-being perspective, if nothing else. So you've got the commercial benefit. They're more up to speed with what's happened. They know what's been going on with key clients. They know what's going on with, for example, key business performance indicators. So they know they've got a job to come back to, so it keeps them engaged from that perspective. But you're not asking them to actively participate in a sales team, in a key customer review, in a production planning session, for example. Avoid that. It's about touching base, making sure they're okay, giving them an opportunity to socialise, and just keeping the confidence there that they've got something to come back to and they're engaged with it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the thing is HMRC technically can audit what you're doing, so you wouldn't want them writing reports that obviously they've written. You wouldn't want them sending emails all over the place and visible communications with clients and going out getting business, because that's against the rules really. But so the sort of things that were being talked about were thinking about perhaps their area of the business and whether, you know, as we come out of lockdown, whether there are changes that need to be made in their part of the business, and if so, what might those be? Those sorts of general thinking things where they could not be bound to a timetable, but just be doing something a little bit productive whilst they're on furlough, because they are still being paid, but not, as you said, Ashley, binding them to a timetable or doing anything that's massively visible to the outside world.
Hey, Nikki.
Yeah, I was just going to say, of course, the other thing they can do on furlough is they can do training.
Yes.
So one thing I suggested to my guys last week who were about to go on furlough was that if they find a course that they feel would be beneficial either professionally or personally, then to let us know, and we would be quite happy to look at that and, you know, and set that up for them if they wanted to do that.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Before I close totally, does anybody want me to go back to a particular slide, particular part? Has anyone got any specific questions they want something else they want to look at again?
Yeah, I've got one.
Yeah.
Hang on. Oh yeah. Right. Well, one is a suggestion. We've set up a WhatsApp group which we find very informal, and it goes to the furloughed people as well. And no one said, look, you know, I don't want to hear from you at all. But we just found it an informal way of dealing with just small things, really.
Good idea.
The other question is, we're sort of debating this as to whether it's reasonable to invite furloughed people to some of the social virtual meetings, or which I wouldn't like criticise them if they didn't attend, but I think it'd be better if they attended some of them, again to maintain them as part of the team. Whether that's right and in the spirit of the furlough.
I would say it's absolutely in the spirit of the furlough to ask them to do that, but I think whatever a key element to the social element of communicating is, it's got to be optional.
Yeah. I wouldn't want it to be anything other than optional for anyone, really.
No, that's
don't want to do it. It's not the point in having a social gathering, is there?
Yeah, exactly right. So yeah, the phrasing I've used in this slide is try to make 2 a week. You know, it's way more relaxed than what's required from a business operations perspective. Yeah. And the same would apply to your furlough team, I would suggest.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else from anyone else before I hand back to Rob? Nice. Good.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ashley. That's great. I suppose first question, just generally, are you happy? We'll talk about this outside of this meeting, but are you happy for us to push this out to people, not just the 2 or 3 that missed the session, but it would be helpful to other people, I think, if we can edit it in such a way that it's useful.
Yeah, I'll send it to you as a PowerPoint, Rob, and then you can do what you need to, and I'll send it to the rest of the guys as well.
Is there a recording of the session?
Yes, there is.
Right, so we could have that possibly.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'll send you the presentation out. Kelly's got the recording.
Right.
I'll turn that off now. Kelly's got the recording, so that'll be sent out to you separately.